political arena. With your hosts, Sophia Nelson, Bill O'Reilly, Brian Mistro, and TJ McCormick. It's real voices, raw politics, and no bullshit. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Thursday Thoughts. This is Brian Mistro. I'm here with my dear closest friend, Bill O'Reilly, tonight. Of course, I'm broadcasting from the SS Minnow. And we're glad you could join us tonight. If I'm not sure where you're watching from, whether it be X or Facebook or YouTube or where you're watching from, but I'm going to say it again at the end. Give us a like, give us a follow, and so forth, because what we try to do is really bring a lot of different types of programming to you. And so if you haven't watched Thursday Thoughts before, it is I don't want to say apolitical because we may talk politics, but it's a nonpartisan approach to looking at issues that face the country and sometimes the world, and try to dive deep into them and say, okay, why is this happening? What's happening here? Or even how do we fix it? So, and we don't always have a fix. So it's been a while since Bill and I have done this, and love Bill to death, and he and I have a lot of fun. Very similar beliefs on a lot of topics, other than who the best basketball team is. Outside of that, I think we get along pretty good. So tonight's topic is going to be DSA candidates. That's Democrat Socialists of America candidates. And even if they're not technically a DSA candidate, the far left progressives. In this case, what we're going to kind of focus on is the race in Michigan with the senator race between Stevens and AES. I'm sorry, I never can say his name right. Anyway,
I'll say it, yeah.
yeah, so he won barely, but he won. And the question that came across my mind, Bill, was why? Who's voting for him? What's the demographic? Why are they voting for him? And so let me
Yeah,
let
it's
me hold on. Let me show
yep,
just real quickly, and I'll show one slide, and then I've got a lot of slides of
show
a
away.
lot of facts. So let me do real quickly. So if you're looking at this is not the final. I think it was as of yesterday, but it's he's ahead of her, I guess, by 15,000 votes or something, roughly 1% or 1 point ahead of Haley Stevens. And Mallory McMorrow, who dropped out, suspended her campaign, did get 4%, but she did endorse Abdul, I think a week or two before the primary. And so, Bill, I've got a whole lot of facts. I've got a whole lot of slides. And I'm going to tell you that I've already looked at them, so I get to cheat and say I already know who
I
some of
haven't
these
seen them.
people are. You haven't seen them, which is always kind of fun to do on this program. So let me throw out to you, and then we'll look at the facts. Who do you think is voting for for these folks, and why?
I mean, that's where I think we really need to draw the camera back from partisan politics for a little bit, and we could talk about this for months. We have a lot less
Yeah,
time than that.
yeah.
I think we need to figure out what's going on with America's youth, and I don't mean that as a accusation. I
Mm,
mean that in a loving way. It is. I mean, most of the DSA members, and if there's a lot of press about the DSA in New York because they've done really well here, and they're largely headquartered here. There's a lot of kind of Brooklyn is I think their spiritual headquarters, and the DSA is working because of white voters, white, fairly affluent voters in their 20s, early 30s of these early younger generations that are to me falling into some very dangerous thinking. And we've been here before. We were here in the 70s, and it was much worse in the 70s. I mean, there were
mm,
there were
mm,
literally thousands of bombings in the 70s around the country from the various radical groups out there.
Mm.
I mean, I grew up in the city for the first 9 years of my life, and there was always a bomb going off in a locker at the Port Authority or at Penn Station or at Grand Central or Francis Tavern downtown. That was a bad bombing, people killed. But there were bombings all over this country. There were shootings. A lot of cops were shot. If you remember all the, the Brinks
Yeah.
robberies,
Yeah.
where they
Yeah.
were we're taking money for the revolution, or you go to Patty Hearst with the God, I forgot the SLA, the Symbionese Liberation Army. Like, this is not the first time that America's youth have, or a portion of them have gone radical. I grew up in the city in the 60s, in 68, 69. I was like 6 years old, but I'm running around Central Park. It was all the hippies. They were all like, and you had some people that were dangerous too. You had a lot
Mm.
of loving, peaceful people, but you had people that were dangerous. We're falling into that, and it was in those years there was this complete rejection of everything American, everything Western, everything that we had heretofore
Mm.
accomplished in society. It was like, we want to redo. There was a film that came out, Wild in the Streets, and I think 68 or 70. And it was 14 or Fight was the march song. It was, you can't trust anybody over 14. And they were going to get, they put LSD into the water supply of Congress. It was a crazy movie. It was this psychedelic, 2 in the morning, ABC, did it. But it was a pretty good movie. But how they sweet, so they get everybody on acid. It's like, you can't trust anybody over a 14. Well, the people who made that and the people who were 14 at the time and running around in that movie are now like my age, and they're or a little bit
Okay.
older, and they managed to give up the radicalism, and they became capitalists, and they built a lot of great things in this country, and they invented things, and they brought modernity here. And it's like, for some reason, this has been awakened again, technology, the rest of the reasons. But these kids are lost, and I spend my life hating them politically and making fun of them, like the Scarsdale radicals who go and move into Brooklyn and become like,
Yeah.
Marxian. And I like to make fun of them, but from their perspective, this is a they're it's very difficult. They're very disillusioned. They don't, I mean, look at, this
Yeah.
conversation has happened a lot of times, but you go through the great institutions, religious institutions took a huge hit. What happened with some of the churches, huge hit. The government, not trustworthy. The media, not trustworthy. Corporate America, not trustworthy. Like, they're falling into this nihilistic way. It's not exclusive to the left. I mean, you had McCarthyism in
Yeah.
the
On the
in the
right.
50s, late
Yeah.
50s, and McCarthy was right about a lot. The Soviets were infiltrating the American government. They were doing that, but a lot of the people that fell into McCarthyism went bananas. And you had the John Birchers, and Eisenhower is a communist spy, and fluorine is the red Chinese are doing it to us, fluoride in the water,
Yeah.
all this stuff like that. So it's not just one side that could fall into it, but we're back into a place like that. And it feels, it's either nascent, meaning it's going to take off in the next election, or it's going to get extinguished and we move on. But what I spend my life trying to figure out is, how do you extinguish it? And you don't just want to extinguish it with I don't mean force like violence, but like, attack. You need to diffuse some of this stuff. And like,
Yeah.
hey, this country is still the best country on earth. One thing, Brian, and I'll shut up in a second. I've
No.
kind of
No. No. I'm
filibustered on
enjoying
you.
this actually.
I mentioned to you earlier. There's a reporter over at Free Press called Lucy Biggers, and she's wonderful. She was an environmental activist and a journalist in her 20s, and pretty radical. And I have a daughter in that world also, my eldest daughter. And I'm not saying she does it because she really cares, and she's a lawyer now, or about to be, and she'll do her work. But Lucy Biggers basically went for she fell into some of the most extreme cliques on the environmental side and on the political side.
Mm.
And she ended up coming out of it. And she speaks on a podcast, which is wonderful. If anybody's not watching this, and Triggernometry, which is just dynamite, a couple of
I'll put a
Brits
link to
from
that when we're done. I'll put a link to
Trigger.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Her interview is fabulous. And it shows how you she expresses very honestly. I think it's almost an hour, the interview, but she very, very honestly, and she kind of unveils herself in her kind of a skinless interview. And she says, like, I wanted so much to be part of this, and I was so excited to be part of something that was for the good. And it was like, I suddenly, and then she watched as she started getting pushed into more and more extreme thinking.
Hmm.
And she'd be a classic DSA person. Like she
Hmm.
would have been right in the middle of this, but she got out beforehand. She saw a couple of things and said, that doesn't really compute. And she secretly went out and read a couple of books. And over time, and she was, part of the leadership. I
Yeah.
mean, she
Yeah.
was a journalist in that movement. And what I'm saying, it can happen. And I think we need to find ways to keep talking with young people of all colors and to reassure them that the world is not coming to an end tomorrow,
Yeah.
and that America is not the worst place on earth. In fact, it's probably the best country that ever existed. We do so much good in the world. We don't do everything good. We do some things, that are not so good. But overall, on balance, this is a pretty amazing place, and life is worth living here. And that's the message that I think they're not getting, and so they're turning to radicals like the AOC world or Said or whoever they are,
Right. Right.
mom
Yeah,
dummies.
the mom, and I'm gonna circle back to that because it is something you know a lot about. One of the differences would be in this particular race, the Michigan Senate race, we had an establishment candidate who was heavily funded, and then we had the DSA candidate, and it was very interesting that. Well, first of all, I want to tell you, and this is probably more of a discussion for one of our political arenas, but they had her down 10 points in the polls, and she was within a point of the finish. So that's one interesting aspect. But the other one is, the difference in the demographics that voted for. So let me show a couple of slides real quick, and I'm gonna share some stuff with you, Bill, and get your take on it because some of this did actually surprise me. So,
And
um,
and remember that she was an incumbent
and she was an
with
incumbent
all
too.
all the advantages of incumbency,
and
which are
and the fact that she's
profound.
actually flipped red districts too, which he has never done, not a single one in his entire political career. But again, it's going to be really hard for me not to go partisan with him because I completely disagree with pretty much everything he agrees with. So, but that being said, I'm going to read some of this. We're going to try and keep it nonpartisan if at all possible. All right. So for those that are just listening, I'm going to read out the slide, and I'm gonna flip to a second slide after this one because I want to show specific demographics. So, quote, among the nearly 24 counties where at least 95% of the expected ballots were in, El Sayed, that's AES, is winning 58.4% of the vote in counties where at least 30% of the adults have a bachelor's degree. I'm going to underline this for a second. 30% of the adults have a bachelor's degree. On the flip side, Stevens, and Stevens was his counterpart, or the establishment candidate for the Democratic primary. Stevens is winning 51.4% of the vote in counties where less than 30% share of adults are college educated. El Sayed, again AES, is similarly leading Stevens in counties with high median income so far, while Stevens leads in lower income counties. That surprised me. Now I'm going to show a real quick. This is a major pollster, and I'm just going to read just through a couple of these. Um, the question was, who is the DSA voter who is voting for the AESs? 40% of them are white, 20% Hispanic, 21% black, and 30% Asian. Now here's kind of coming back to your point that you're talking about, Bill. Ages 18 to 29, or nearly 40%. 40% 18 through 29. And these are folks that have a positive view of DSA, or the Democratic Socialists of America. So for 30 to 49, it was 35%. That's actually really close. When it gets closer to our age, Bill, it drops to 25%, and 65 over is basically the same. It's at 27%. Now, this is
Yeah,
what you were
and
talking
the
about here. I'm sorry, Bill. I'll finish with this because I want to hear
yep.
exactly what you're going to say. If they had college degrees, it was 41%. 41% if had a favorable view of DSA with college degrees. Without it, it was 26%. And if you had upper income, upper middle class, 40% agreed and believed in these views. I'm sorry, I'm
Well,
having
these
trouble getting my head around that one.
no, and it's more pronounced in New York, where a lot of Black Democrats are concerned, and there's a big rift between Black Democrats and the DSA
Yeah,
in New
because the
York.
black Democrats voted for Stevens. They didn't
Yeah,
vote for him. Yeah,
yeah, they are not, and no one is, no group is monolithic, but in general, that they are not pro-socialists.
yeah.
The Black Democrats are a lot more conservative. They're a lot more practical. They know the real world. They know reality. They understand what really happens at
Right.
the end of the day, and so they're more centered, in my opinion. But it's the same thing. It's the same thing in New York, and the greater level of college education, the greater level that they're going to DSA candidates. But you mentioned that percentage that came out from 18 to 29. Those are voting constituencies that never turn out traditionally. They don't turn out, and like everyone's talking
Yeah.
about the
Oh,
youth
you're saying
vote,
they don't turn out to vote.
youth vote never shows up, but for these, they're doing it. They're figuring out, and they're smart, and they're working very hard. And the DSA has some really bright operatives, just like Working Families Party. Also, they're very well trained, and they realize that they can steal a primary. They can grab one if they get with social media. They can move them around the bars and all the young people and all
Hmm.
the young hipsters that are all left. If we all show up, they're never
Mm.
going to expect it. Boom, and that's what they're doing, and they're picking these primaries off, and it's smart. It's well done. If anyone wins a primary or an election, I tip my hat to them. They put the work, and they did it, and the other side, and they did it, and they accomplished it, and the other side didn't. Um, so there's that. But they're coming right out of these universities, Brian. They're coming right out of the,
Mm.
like, woke city, and I think, and I would suggest that probably the better the university, the more radical the operative coming out.
So let me ask you this one because this one did surprise me. Um, I would
I
have
should say the more
thought.
prestigious the university. Excuse me.
Yeah, yeah, I get you. So
Not the
I
better.
would have thought that, um, and then I'm going to share the statistic, but I would have thought that the folks that would be most drawn to socialism would be those that were the most downtrodden. It would be those
Forced.
that were having the roughest time in their lives. It would be those that would say, you know what, I don't care about capitalism because I can't even hardly put food on my table right now. I'm living paycheck to paycheck. But that's not who voted for them. It was
All,
middle and
all,
upper middle class that voted for them.
which is the same crew that has been behind basically every left wing revolution for the last 250 years. It's
Really?
it, it Fr- French Revolution was a middle class revolution. It was started by middle class thinking people. Like, they were ginning it up. It wasn't coming from the bottom. It was coming from the middle. Same thing with Pol Pot in Cambodia. These were like aristocrats that went to Paris and got taught, and they went socialism, and they joined into the things. Same thing in China. It was middle class. It's all these socialist revolutions. It
Hmm.
generally or left wing revolutions. They almost always start from that upper middle class area, that are highly educated, and they fall into this pattern
I
of
did
thinking.
not know that.
Look, you
Wow.
could go through all. I
Oh
mean,
no.
I'm sure that
Oh,
I'm sure there's been one or two that have not followed that, but most of them are upper middle class revolutions. That's where they start. Those are the sparks.
it's you know what, I trust what you say explicitly because I've known you long enough. I know that when you say something, you know what you're talking about.
I just don't
So
want to be embarrassed, so I
Ah,
just
so let me bounce another one off of you. Historically, you said that this has happened throughout the years. You were mentioning earlier, back in the '60s, in the '70s, there was I guess you'd call it the hippie movement, the socialist movement, anti-capitalism movement, and so forth.
and the
What
yippies back then.
and
Yeah.
the hippies, right? So what
Oh, no,
what
they
stopped
had
it?
the yippies were another group. Abby Hoffman, the yippies, they were a little bit more radical. They were.
Okay.
Yeah.
What changed it? I mean, it's obviously we're not a socialist country, so obviously it never took off. It obviously came to, I don't want to say dead, but it came to more or less a screeching halt. What do you think changed that? Was it losing elections? Was it people growing up? Was it the reality that capitalism may not be the utopia that we want it to be, but it's a hell of a lot better than socialism? I mean, what do you think kind of changed that, Bill?
I'm guessing here, but hopefully it's an educated guess. I think a lot of it is that from the earlier incarnation of the 60s, 70s, was that the Vietnam War ended. We ended up pulling out of Vietnam. I don't really
Hmm.
love the way we pulled out, but we pulled out of Vietnam, and they lost the organizing issue. That was part of it. Also,
That's a good
the
point.
country
Yeah.
switch. I mean, I think what really did it, what really severed those two eras was Reagan coming in, because
Hmm.
Reagan came in, and I was in high school. I was kind of lefty, and I, falling for the great ideas, and I had long hair and I was smoking pot. You know what I mean? But but then I grew up. But Reagan came in, and he was like, "Damn it, this is the shining city on the hill. This
Right.
is as good as it gets. Let's make it better." And that whole ethos of the country changed. You were around. You felt it. There was like it was those were pretty heady times for a lot of traditional type people. But it's I think what started leftism coming back was well, it was first the Iraq War, the surge also that
Mm,
really helped them
mm,
organize those pink, the pink ladies running around with the pink pussy hats and all that stuff,
yeah.
whatever they call themselves, like that. It began to organize, and then you had the collapse of in 2008, the economic collapse, and then you had a soaring figure like Obama come in there and like light everybody up, and Obama was kind of drawing traditional liberal Republicans and liberal Democrats, pulling them over a little bit further left. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And there's a lot of things I think contributed to it, but right now we're in a place where I think and we could save another show for criticism of the right. There's
Sure.
plenty on both sides, but the young people on the left I think are out on another planet right now. A lot of them
Hmm.
they're just not living in reality and they don't know it. And I mean, to think that socialism is going to work the 107th time when it didn't work the first 106,
Yeah.
it's come on, it's come on.
What's Margaret Thatcher that said, the problem with socialism is you eventually run out of other people's money, right?
Exactly,
But
exactly.
what's
But you
interesting?
see, you see, Brian. Like I'll just give you an example. Like New York has started this, and it'll go across the country and all the blue states. They're banning these data centers. And
Yeah.
that's a big rally around the progressives right now. It's like data. I mean, the people are angry. I'm going to get that data center. They're going to attack the fence. That data center is the future. Like if we're slow getting out of the box on data, China's not going to be,
No.
and we're going to
No.
be so far behind. We'll never catch up. Like in a real way, like in a Joe Carvin way.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
be we'll be 100 generations behind in a year. You know?
And for those watching, if you don't know, and I'm sitting here going like this, shaking my head up and down. So we do a show that's called The Hinge of History. It's with Joe Carvin, and the show is only about AI. It's completely apolitical. But we talked about the data centers and shutting down the data centers, and it's like it's cutting off your nose to spite your face. You're trying, you're. It doesn't change anything. You're just giving the benefit to either other states or other countries by doing that. Anyways, we could literally do shows on this, which we do, and that is every Monday and Wednesday. Please join it if you're at all interested in AI.
It's it's
Uh,
it's it's a lot of fun. That show is a
it
lot of fun,
is.
and for anyone who hasn't seen it, Joe is a huge Joe Carpenter. He's a wonderful guy, brilliant guy, and he is one of the world's leading optimists on AI. Like
Yes,
he
he is.
sees he's there with Elon Musk of land of plentiful and it's all coming, and it's really fun to listen to him. And I hope he's right.
Yeah, I do too. It's amazing. It's a lot of fun to do that show and his views on stuff. Although I will say for the next week we're going to do the potential negatives of AI too. So we do level set it. We should try to be honest in the whole program. I want to come back to something that you mentioned, and you said the youth moving towards DSA. But as I look back, I'm going to put this slide up again if I can, Bill. And you're saying so 18 to 29, it was 39% are have favorable views of socialism. 30 to 49, it was 35%. So the reality is that, well, first of all, the reality is that over half do not have a favorable view. But the other part of the reality is that it's not just 18 through 29, it's basically up to 40 years old. I mean, it's not just the kids. I hate to call them kids. It's about the age of my kids.
Yeah, mine too.
It's not just kids, and I wonder if there could be some connection over the last 6 years with COVID, with the cost of goods and inflation going up, the cost of everything, and people becoming, life becoming harder, folks living more and more paycheck to paycheck. You know, um, I don't. Did that have any effect? You think on because the up to 40 years old, that's not quite middle age, but these
I
are
think
people that
I think
have their careers. I mean, these are
yeah.
What do you think? What do
I
you think, Bill?
I think yes. I think all of it. I mean, I think for some Democrats, and I was going to say people on the left, but not everyone, not everybody on the left is from the left. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's some
yeah,
conservative Democrats. So I think for some, a lot of them were allured by the most anti-Trump force available. And it's just
mm,
and the way they see it is that Trump broke all the norms of politics. He's an incredibly dishonest guy. Like in their view, he lies 100 times a day. His family's getting rich off stuff. Like they're totally disillusioned.
corruption side, the corruption
And
thing.
so the corruption thing, and they're looking at the regular Democrats and saying, "You didn't stop this. I've got to go someplace else." And
Hmm.
that's which is kind of what happened
That's
on
a
the right
good
with
point. I had not thought of that, Bill. That's a very interesting point.
they're desperate. They're desperate, and they're so anti-Trump, and they really believe that. And they believe that the country is slipping away that they love, the No Kings rally, all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, they're going for the most radical, just to some extent.
Yeah, and there's a I think there's a lot of real proof, and I'm not saying I agree or disagree with them. Again, I'm keeping it completely apolitical, but uh, there's some real proof to what you're saying because Stevens, in another election at another time, would have had that seat wrapped up long ago. Now she didn't lose
Totally.
by much, but that would be the establishment traditional union endorsed candidate, that
She
runs
would
in a
have
purple state.
she would have had that seat for decades, for two or
She
three
would have,
decades,
and she lost
and it would
it.
have been
And
the only thing that would have beaten her is if she was out of whack ethnically with the district. Like if she was white and the district was 90% black, somebody may a black candidate might eclipse her eventually, but that wasn't the case here.
yeah, no, it's actually she won what 70% of the black vote. So
Exactly.
no, it's and it goes back to your point. I think you're right. I think that there is a when you look at today's approvals of the different parties, you see that from the polling, from the Pew polling, then that's what we were showing earlier. You see that Democrats are from a generic D plus whatever. They're like D+8, I think, right now. From a generic Democrat voting for Congress, but the disapproval of the Democratic Party is abysmal. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
I can't remember what the number is, but it is so bad, and that would
Yeah. I
add a
was
lot
really
of
surprised by it.
yeah,
Yeah.
that would add a lot of factual, coincidental things to what you're saying because it adds some credibility. They're pissed off. This is a lot of people that are pissed off with the Democratic Party. Is it fair or not? I would leave that somewhere else. But
Yeah.
I think
I'll just
you're
add
onto
one.
something.
I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'll just add one more thing, and I'm lifting this from that trigonometry episode because I watched that last night, but I've had this conversation with a lot of people. She makes the point in the podcast that this is such a serious issue that young people are selecting never to have children, and like
Hmm.
they are eliminating a line of genes that has existed forever.
Hmm.
And they're bailing it. Why would I want to bring anyone into this world? And you hear it. I had three different nurse practitioners, or the phlebotomists. Like I always chit chat there. You have any family? You married? That kind of stuff like that. Three have said to me, "Oh, I'll never have children. Not in this world. I'm not going to have children." You're cutting off your line of existence forever because you think the world is that bad. Look outside. There's green. There's blue sky. There's water. There's like, come on. You know what I mean? It's
Go
not
touch
that bad.
grass.
Don't just I mean, I know life is challenging. I have
Yeah.
down times too, but there's a dandelion out there to smell or to eat if you want.
Yeah.
Fry it up Italian style, you know?
You know,
It,
it,
it just it's really sad. It's really sad where you have a generation almost committing suicide to some extent, at least gestationally, and what do you have to do to get to there?
I just
Like how
saw,
much?
I think it was on Forbes too, and I think you're making a great point. I know we're out of time, and we've got another program starting right after this one, but I just want to make another point to back you up. We've got, I mean, my kids are not talking about kids at all. I didn't have kids until I was roughly 29. Now, some of that was biological issues with my
I was
wife. We
43.
got that
Yeah.
fixed.
Yep.
But you also look at the realities that are happening, and you look today. You look at the average age of someone owning a home. First home is 40 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, those are things that we're going to have to address, Bill, as a country, because I had my first one at what, 24, 25, I think, and
Yep.
and
Yep.
it's just I think we've got a lot of things to address as a country, and I still truly believe that the folks that are voting DSA are doing it. First, I'm trying not to be political, but it's a horrible mistake, and I'm sorry, you know me long enough to say that. But I think it's also there's something deeper that they're, as you were saying, they're very turned off with life,
They're
right?
desperate. They're
They're,
desperate.
they're
Yeah.
desperate for something different, and when you get desperate, that's when you do and take on desperate things. And so, been a great episode, my friend. It always is with you.
Great talking to you, Brian. Yeah. I always enjoy it.
You dive in stuff, and it just fabulous being on with you, folks. I don't know if you're watching right now, if you're watching from YouTube or Facebook or X. If you're on X, give us a follow. If you're on YouTube, please go to YouTube and subscribe to our channel. It's at No Bull Media Group, just as you see it. And if you're on Facebook, give us a follow, share it with your friends. And if you've got a question, leave a question. We'll read it out on air. We'll talk through it. Thursday Thoughts is one of my favorite things actually to do, Bill. I enjoy it more than talking straight politics, because I think
Oh,
it's
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think you and I
I'm
are the
so sick
same
of straight
way.
politics.
Yeah. And so if you leave us a thought, give us a like, let us know, and hopefully we'll catch you every Thursday doing on the Thursday Thoughts. And we look forward to seeing you. Until then, the Restoring the American Dream starts in roughly 30 minutes. That's another deep dive into not quite Thursday Thoughts, but it's a deep dive into things that are affecting America. Give us a follow, give us a watch, and we'll see you there. Thanks, Bill. Always good to see you,
Thanks,
my
Brian.
friend. All right, now.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, bye now.
Good night.
The No Bull Political Arena is on all major social media platforms. Make sure to give us and your host a follow.
Hey everybody, this is Sophia Nelson. Follow me at I am Sophia Nelson on every one of my social media platforms.
I'm Bill O'Reilly, and you can reach me at Twitter at WFBOR.
Hey, this is TJ. Follow me on X or Twitter at TJ McCormack.
This is Brian Mistro, and you can follow me on X at Brian_Mistro, or follow along on Facebook at Brian.Mistro.
A No Bull Media Group member.